Right, hello everyone. Evelyn here from Signature Recruitment. I'm the co-founder of Signature and director of our London office. With me here are Sharon, my business partner and director of the Bristol office, and Rachel, head of projects and delivery, who will share her recruitment experience and top CV tips in this webinar. First of all, a really big welcome to everyone who is joining us for our 30-minute webinar on how to edge the competition and how to stand out from the crowd with your CV. Secondly, I wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone sending in many great questions. We're hoping to answer as many of them as possible today. Having worked in recruitment in the last recession in 2008 and 9, I fully appreciate and understand how challenging the market at the moment is for anyone looking for work, including for those who have been made redundant, but also for recent graduates who are coming to the market for the first time, or for those who are in a role but are looking for a new challenge in potentially a totally new field. And as many of you would have seen, there have been quite a lot of news over the last few weeks in regards to a record drop of available vacancies last quarter compared to the previous year, meaning that right now there are more candidates applying for the same roles. So having a really great and also relevant CV to the role that you are applying for will ensure that you actually get called for the interview. On this note, I will hand over to Rachel. She has been with Signature for 7 years, assisting candidates with finding their next roles and having provided guidance to hundreds and hundreds of our lovely candidates on how to successfully apply for roles. In regards to the format, Rachel will share her expertise for about 20-25 minutes, so there'll be enough time at the end to answer any questions that may come up during the webinar. So if anything comes up that you would like Rachel to answer, just put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. On that note, over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Evelyn. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. To make you aware before we start, after the webinar, I will send through all of the slides and a full recording with audio. So I hope that might put some of you at ease if you are a note taker like myself. And yeah, as Evelyn mentioned in the introduction, I have 7 years experience in particular with providing CV support and interview preparation for candidates. So I hope in me sharing some of my experience with you today, it will show you what you can do to beat that competition in the current market. So without further ado, let's talk about what you can do. In summary, what you can do is own the elements of the recruitment process that you yourself have control over. Primarily, this will be your CV, as it is, of course, the document that represents you. You also have control over your online presence, so across social media platforms, but also professional networking sites such as LinkedIn. And you can also control how you represent yourself in an interview, but also throughout the entire recruitment process, thinking about how you communicate and interact with potential hirers. An example of this would be here at Signature, we communicate with a lot of our candidates through social media platforms. Maybe we received a message on the platform that was quite casual. It might include an emoji, which is absolutely fine, especially for platforms such as Instagram. However, once we have engaged, directed them through to an office contact to discuss their CV, we would expect that communication to shift to a more professional standing, especially written communication. So that's why I mentioned that there. Before we started the webinar and in the run-up, we asked for all of your questions, and around 90% of those focused on CV and what to include in CV. So that has become the key focus of what I'm about to discuss. So let's discuss your CV. Some days in recruitment, I looked at hundreds and hundreds per day, CVs wise. And so the following that I'm about to cover is based just purely on my experience during that time. And one of the first things that I wanted to mention is forget the rules. I spoke with a lot of candidates who would tell me they had received previous CV advice, and maybe that person had told them they cannot go over 2 pages, for example, and given them a 2-page rule. And what I would say is that I've never come across a hiring manager who has refused to read past 2 pages of a CV that they're interested in. And I do believe that if there is information that would take you more length over to maybe a 3rd page, but that information is going to secure you an interview in the next stage in the process, then we should absolutely include that on there and forget the rule. Secondly, tailor your CV. And this should start right at the top. So for example, if you have a profile at the top of your CV and that's the first thing that the hiring manager is going to be reading, make sure that that is tailored as much as possible. If you have a profile at the moment, it might currently cover yourself, where you're at the moment and your skills, but perhaps think about making it about yourself and the role you are applying for. So why you want that type of role, why you have a passion for maybe that industry or where you're looking to work. And next is give context on your CV. You will of course list your duties. So you might have diary management, followed by inbox management. However, giving context to those duties will display a wider breadth of skills. So if I can give you an example, on my CV, I might have a bullet point that says host live webinars. And to give context to that duty, I could then change it to I organise, promote, and host live webinars using our CRM system, Microsoft Outlook, also the Zoom platform. And then from that context, the hiring manager can see not only my webinar hosting skills, but also organisation skills, marketing skills, and the use of IT systems. The things I have mentioned here, I would say, are the priorities. Think about those when you're working on your CV. And the things I'm about to cover next are really from my experience thinking about the hiring manager as they are going through what will now be a high volume of applications for each job. So the first one is include accurate dates. A hiring manager might be looking at your CV, and if your dates are not accurate or it appears on your CV that you have a large employment gap, they will have questions surrounding that. The thing at the moment, the way the market is that they might have a CV that they're looking at straight after yours, where the timeline is consistent, makes perfect sense, they don't have any questions, and that candidate will be the person that gets a call for interview. So we really want to make sure that our dates are accurate, beat the competition. And for the same reason, we also want to cover any gaps that you have in your employment timeline. So an example of a gap might be if you've taken a period of independent travel. So you can cover that really simply without adding length to your CV by putting one line, traveling, followed by the dates that you were abroad. And that works the same for any other valid employment gap. So maternity leave followed by the dates of your leave, and also a period of study. So studying and then the dates of the course that you completed. Further thinking about the hiring manager, working through a really large volume of applications, they might begin to skim read. It is human nature, especially if you're working under a time constraint. So we want to prioritize the details on our CV for that hiring manager, including relevant and transferable skills up at the top in our profile or underneath the profile, and make sure the duties underneath your previous roles are relevant to the role you're applying for right at the top. So your most relevant duty working down to the least relevant at the bottom. And by doing this, we hope that even in skim reading, your skills won't be missed and prompts that call for an interview. I do just want to take a moment after what I've covered there, based on my experience, to check in with Evelyn and see if any questions have perhaps come through the Q&A box at the bottom.
Thanks, Rachel. We haven't had a Q&A through the bottom, but somebody just emailed us to the signature team. There's actually a couple of candidates who have questions around the same topics. And it's really right now with some candidates applying for roles in different sectors. So what would you advise to somebody if somebody were to look to create a CV, but they're looking to transfer their skills into a new sector? What do you think would, like, what advice would you give somebody?
Okay, I think if you are in that position looking to transfer into a completely different area, probably the key thing that you want to convey is why you're interested in changing track. So why you're interested in going into that different industry, and then also highlighting the transferable skills that you have at the moment that you can carry forward into that new industry. So perfect place to do that would be in either your cover letter or that profile, tailored profile that we've been talking about. And I think that also it might be good to have in mind a particular role that you're aiming for in that new space. And you can do some Googling online to find job descriptions that are available on company websites or an in-depth written job advert. And you can look at that document to tailor the duties on your CV towards that role. And that would help you to tailor towards a different type of industry. I hope that might help with that question. Evelyn, do you have a next question for me?
I actually do. Slight issues with Zoom here. Another question that has come up a couple of times via email is, if I haven't been selected for the role following an interview, can I ask for feedback from the manager who I met with?
Okay. Okay, the short answer is definitely yes, you are able to ask. But to elaborate on that answer, I would probably just want to mention that there is definitely no obligation from any business to provide interview feedback from anywhere. So some companies do have a policy of not providing feedback. So in answering that, asking that question, of the interviewer or the person who set up the interview, you could get something constructive back. We could also get a response that the feedback is not provided. So be open-minded about both types of responses you could receive. I think that might be all the questions that have come through, and my next slide is actually covering a lot of your questions that you have sent through to us prior to the webinar, so I'll move straight into those. The first one being that one of you asked, how can I create an eye-catching CV? And I think that in response to this question, I do want to mention that it is perhaps a misconception that a fancy image or a graphic or an unusual font will grab a hiring manager's attention. But I do have to say, in all honesty, that when I've worked through CVs, or certainly a large volume of CVs, the ones that grab my attention the most are the ones that make my life easier, to be quite frank. So the ones that have clear timelines, quality content, perhaps there's achievements on there that I can then open communication with the applicant and discuss with them. And that's what would then kind of move them on to the next stage, is those elements, as opposed to a picture or something, you know, different on the CV there. So I hope that that helps. The next question I have is definitely relevant to our current times at the moment. So should I include temporary work that I've completed during lockdown on my CV? And, you know, if I was speaking with a graduate who is perhaps kickstarting their career, I would say put all the experience on your CV. Is always transferable skills from any experience. But I am aware that a lot of you will have honed your experience over some years and, you know, built up skills in one particular area. And I can completely understand how you might feel that including that temporary work would perhaps dilute that experience. If that is the case, what I would perhaps like to refer back to is just what we said about looking at describing employment gaps. So you might want to put that temporary work there just as a one line to say temporary work during lockdown, the dates that you completed that work. That will certainly make the hiring manager's life easier in knowing what they might need to reference you for a compliance perspective later down the line, and wouldn't display a gap there, and they can always ask you for some more information if that's relevant. The next question here that I have is, how can I communicate that I'm always successful within my roles? And I would say that there's two key ways to do this. First off, I would say that I come across really commonly with candidates that they will have a role on their CV under a company that they've worked within for a long period of time. And only when I've chatted with them will I then find out that they actually started off in a different role and they were really successful and promoted or progressed through the business to the role that I'm looking at on the CV now. And I think it might be really useful to convey the success that you've had by including maybe even just 1 to 2 sentences under the company title to explain the progression that you've had through roles. So for myself, I've been at Signature for 7 years, and I started off as a candidate manager and through promotion now in my current position as head of projects and operations. So that's how I would then explain that in maybe 2 sentences, followed by my current job title and the duties that I carry out. Another way to convey success within roles is to include some key achievements under each position. And I would say definitely 1 or 2 is sufficient. You can make those relevant to the role that you are applying for. So you've achieved that in your current role and it's something that you can also achieve in the company you'd move into, then all the better for that. Moving on to the next question, which is, can I ask for feedback if I've not been selected for an interview? I think we have covered that there, might have come through on email as well. So just to cover briefly, absolutely yes, but you may receive something constructive and you may receive a policy that they don't provide that. And the next question that we have is, in a redundancy situation, how can I stand out against other colleagues in my organisation? So I do understand that if that is the situation you're within at the moment, you may be interviewing for your current role. And my biggest piece of advice with that would be to treat it the same as you would an interview for a company that you've never worked within. I think that it's sometimes easy to rest upon your laurels if you've been within that company for many years and you know managers can see the work that you have carried out there. However, preparation, taking that interview seriously will help beat off the competition that is within your current company as well. So I hope that helps. Whilst we're on the questions portion, Evelyn, do we have any that have come through Q&A at all that I could help with?
Yeah, we had a couple come through. So one of the candidates asked, I have had several short-term assignments via agencies, and I had feedback from some employers that they are concerned about loyalty. Is there a way around it? For example, instead of putting 4 months for a role, should I put 5 years working for one agency and name the roles without dates?
Yes, I would actually say that could be a good idea. I would certainly put that on the CV and see how that reads. It would show the continuity that you have had with that agency, and I'm presuming from that you will have been in a temporary role, been successful within that temporary role, and they've moved you straight into another one, which is actually a really good indication of your work that you have carried out. So certainly you could put the agency as the company title and the dates that you have worked through them, followed then by the job titles and duties that you've carried out to demonstrate experience, and that wouldn't show any gaps or jumpiness in your timeline.
Thanks, Rachel. We have another couple of questions come through. One of them is how should I include personal information on a CV, such as address?
I would say that is completely your choice. If you do include that information, you're willingly passing it along to a third party. I can't see how that information would be used in any way that is detrimental to you. Really, for the job search, they will obviously use your name, but then it's also the quality content in regards to your employment background, skills, and what you can bring into a new position that is the most important. So I would say, as an absolute minimum, make sure you have contact information, so your telephone number and email address, and the rest is your own personal, how you feel about including any more personal details. I'm sure as we do at Signature, we have policies to ensure that candidates' details is fully secure, and we send out privacy notices prior, as soon as you hand that information over, so you'll be able to see how your data is being used.
Thank you, Rachel. We had another question, and I think that might have been a little bit answered, hopefully previously, when we asked about how to transition in a role, in a different sector, or maybe doing something slightly different to your normal role. But we had a question, how do I tailor my CV for a part-time job? For example, if I'm a banker in my main job, but I would like to do some part-time weekend job, for example, in retail or care work, should I still show all my qualifications or only what's relevant? I think some of it we've answered, but I don't know if you could maybe just maybe go over some of that again, Rachel.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, it would be looking at the duties that you've carried out that is relevant to the role you're applying for. So that is the golden rule to stick to there. And I think that if you'd like to convey that you are in particular looking for part-time work, again, it's going back to that cover letter and profile where you have a space to explain your current situation. And you can explain that you're particularly looking for part-time work. And I think it's also really useful to include in there the schedule that you're looking for. Everyone who is looking for part-time work has a set schedule that they would want to stick to, because they may be doing it alongside another commitment. So I'm free on Mondays and Wednesdays all day, and I'm particularly looking for a part-time 2-day per week position.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. I wanted to go over some of the questions, Rachel, that we had a couple of candidates ask in preparation of this webinar. And a couple of candidates actually asked, have the skills that employers are looking for changed due to COVID-19?
Okay, so relevant at the moment. I know through my own market information that in around January this year, before the pandemic was even in our minds at all, that the most sought after skills that hiring managers were looking for were things like people management skills, digital marketing skills. There's some programming and cloud computing in there as well. And what I would say is that hiring managers are still looking for those skills that are relevant to their business, and that hasn't changed. But what the pandemic has prompted from hiring managers is a desire to see some key soft skills from applicants, and the most common of those that we're seeing now we're coming out the other side of the lockdown is showing empathy, how you react and deal with business change, and definitely strong communication skills. So it is those things that are coming to the forefront following the lockdown that we didn't have in January.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And then we have a final question from previously candidates sent in their question is, and I think this is something that probably now more than ever is happening to quite a few candidates, is how to overcome interview nerves before an interview. I think especially with video interviewing being quite new, and some candidates not being that comfortable in front of a camera, what tips would you have for that?
Absolutely. I would say that the best thing to do for nerves is prepare as much as you possibly can. I think that, even in doing this webinar. I'll be a little bit nervous coming in front of people to speak, so we definitely practiced a number of times, and platforms like Zoom that have been so handy through recent times have great functions where you can record yourself in a practice scenario, play it back, and you can actually see how you're doing through a mock run through of an interview. So that is a handy tool to use and help kind of calm the nerves through your preparation. I would say that ahead of a video interview is eliminate anything that can be unpredicted. So check your tech and things of that nature. And we have some resources that I'll move on to next that can help with that. But I want to just mention that nerves can be a good thing. They keep us very focused through an interview scenario, and no one will be ruled out of an interview process because they're nervous. In fact, a lot of hiring managers see that as a really good thing because they obviously do want the role and they want to do well, and that's a great thing for a hiring manager to see.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And I have one final question from one of the attendees at the moment. How would you display on your CV if you had repetitive duties? So if in all my roles, I always did, for example, diary management and travel, and I wouldn't want to repeat and waste space, is it okay to put it under skills or under the profile? Or would you make a focus on each of the employment differences? For example, organizing international festivals for one employer, but then preparing VIP events for another. Like, would you summarize, or would you recommend to maybe spell it out under each employer?
There are a number of different ways that you could do it. I think the way that I would go about that is in the skills section, you would have, if we use just diary management as an example, a bullet point of diary management, and you can also expand on that, giving context, as we mentioned before, the number of years that experience that you have in diary management. And I think that if it's relevant to the role that you're applying for, I would still keep that as a duty under your most recent positions. So when you go to your older roles where the skill set level was perhaps a little bit lower, you could take it out of there even if it was something that you were still doing to focus on other elements. So it depends on how relevant it is to the role you're applying for. And I think that, yeah, you could put an overall summary in your skills, the amount of years that you have doing that duty, keep it in your most recent role, and then focus on different things as you go down. I hope that helps. I want to cover really briefly some of our signature resources. So you are signature candidates and have access to these resources. I've talked quite a lot through the webinar about CV, the work that you can do in your CV. And what I do offer to a lot of candidates is a one-to-one CV workshop. They're usually around 10 to 15 minutes long, and we can actually look at your individual CV specifically. If anyone is interested in that service, my email address is on the slide then. That will be sent around to you as well. Please just contact me and we can organise what's best suitable. We do have available a video on tips for CVs that will cover some of the things that I have covered today and then some. So that might be handy to watch if you're then going to do some work on your CV. Another person prior to this webinar asked, how can they ace a video interview? So wanted to pass along this resource that I think will be useful. It is a link to a video that contains some tips, and also in the bio to that video is the link to a preparation checklist. As we know, preparation is so important, so you can use that ahead of the video interview to make sure you represent yourself in the best way possible. And that brings me to the end of my content. You can see on the slide in front of us just covering our areas of expertise and the sectors that we do recruit for. And so I think it is worth noting that the experience that I have that has been included within the content of this webinar is specific to candidates who were applying for roles in our key sectors. And of course, if it is something a little bit different that you have in your background or are going for in your job search, such as in a creative industry, and certain things such as maybe including graphics or portfolio of artwork on your CV, that would be a little bit different. So just take that into consideration. But certainly everything that I have covered is in line with what we work for and what we work with job-wise. And I hope that it was helpful. I'm going to pass along to Sharon, our Director of the Bristol office, to close.
Rachel, thanks so much for sharing your experience and tips. It's especially useful in the current market, which I know for many is proving to be challenging. The good news is we are starting to see green shoots in the job market in both Bristol and London. Although it's slow so far, this is promising. We anticipate to see an increase initially in temporary and contract positions, and then over the coming months, the permanent market to start to pick up as well. So to keep in touch with us, as Rachel's already said, for information, tips and advice, please do follow us on Instagram, Twitter or Facebook. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you found this useful and we'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Bye everyone, thanks for joining.